Welcome to Everything All Right, the literary talk. My guest today is Frances Quinn, and we're coming full circle because Frances was my very first guest on my very first show a little bit over a year ago. Then we discussed her fabulous debut, The Smallest Man, which I see behind you over your right
Yes.
shoulder, carefully. Your study carefully edited. But today we're actually going to talk about the other beauty, which we see right next to it with the ink blue cover, which is Frances' second novel, That Bonesetter Woman, which is out with Simon & Schuster now. So welcome, Frances.
Thank you. It's nice to be back again.
Yeah, absolutely. Long talk. So tell us about That Bonesetter Woman.
So it's set in Georgian England, and like The Smallest Man, it's inspired by a real historical character, although it's all fiction. And it's about a woman called Endurance Proudfoot who wants to be a bone setter like her father. And bone setting is not a job for a woman, but Endurance is not going to let that stop her.
That's a fantastic summary. So you said already that you were inspired for the character by a real historical character, and then sort of the story around it. What inspired you to that?
It was the character, really. So the character is called Sally Mapp. She was known as Crazy Sally Mapp. And she was a big, clumsy, quite eccentric woman who did learn bone setting from her father when it was very unusual, because you need quite a lot of strength to set bones. So it was something women didn't really do. And yeah, she became one of the first Georgian celebrities. She was very well known. She was famous. People made prints of her. And as soon as I came across her, I thought, oh, I can do something with her. And then I came across some sources suggest that she was the sister of a famous Georgian actress who married a duke and became the Duchess of Bolton. And I just thought, those two sisters, what kind of a relationship would that be? And yeah, that was too good a gift to ignore, really.
Yeah, utterly irresistible. You're right. But first things first. So how did you get into writing?
I've always written, really. I wrote my first novel when I was about 7 or 8. We used to have exercise books at school, and the idea was that you would write a different story every day. And I thought, when I got a fresh exercise book, I thought, well, I'll just fill this one with one whole story, and it'll be like a book. And so I wrote this story, plagiaristically titled "The Adventures of Squirrel Nutkin." Sorry, Beatrix Potter. And yeah, I suppose that was my first book, really. And I remember at the time, my English teacher said, well, she was just my primary school teacher then, she said, one day she'll be good enough to get a book published. And I kind of clung on to that, really, I think, for my whole life. But, you know, as we do, life get in the way for quite
Yes,
a while.
but I like it that you got so inspired with your title because we do have to stand on the shoulders of giants.
Mm.
And how did you then get serious and like finding an agent, which is always the big question for everybody who dreams of writing?
Yeah, I was very lucky. So I had this idea in my head for The Smallest Man, and I tried to write it, but I struggled a bit. And then I saw an advert for the Curtis Brown fiction writing course. And although it's a course you pay for, you have to be selected to go on it. You have to give them your idea for your book and your first chapters. And I had no intention of doing the course because at the time I didn't think anyone could teach you to write. But I thought, well, if I apply for it and if they like the idea, then I know that this idea is worth going on with. So I did apply for it and they did offer me a place. And then, of course, I was far too flattered to say, no, thanks, I'll be all right on my own. So I took the place, and Curtis Brown is a literary agency, and I got picked up by my agent at the end of it when I had about 30,000 words, which is fairly unusual and a big dose of luck.
That's a fabulous story. And what I noticed about That Bonesetter Woman, that it's sort of very, how should I say, it's very sensitively and carefully multi-layered. So how do you go about planning your novels?
I plan a bit in the beginning. So I had a whole synopsis for That Bonesetter Woman. And as I wrote it, it changed because some things don't work out the way that you think they're going to. And then I submitted it to my editor thinking it was really, I thought there would be some edits, but I thought it was basically there. And she came back and said, and she's since summarized her advice as change everything. So,
Right.
so that multi-layered structure wasn't there at that point. It was, she said that it read as a series of short stories, and all the short stories were nice, but they didn't add up to a story. And of course, so often, I'm sure you found this as well, your editor says something and you think, oh, of course, why didn't I see that before? And so then I sort of I think of it as like plaiting hair, that you've got all these strands and sometimes you have to tighten a bit, sometimes you have to make it a bit looser, and just making them all fit together. So there were bits of the story that originally came in quite late and I brought them forward so that they became woven into the whole story. So yeah, it was a 6-month rewrite that nearly killed me, but was worth it in the end.
Absolutely. In the end of the day, edits are your friends, I feel.
Absolutely.
It makes the book better, doesn't they? So, well, how did you do your research for That Bonesetter Woman? Because it's a very different world from The Smallest Man.
Yeah, it is. So I tend to not do too much research at the beginning, because I think you can very easily, firstly, research yourself out of the idea if you find a detail that doesn't fit with your story. And secondly, if you do too much research at the beginning, the temptation is to shovel it all in. And I don't really like historical fiction that hits you over the head with the history. My primary purpose is to write a good story with an accurate historical background, but I'm not writing a history book. So I do just the minimum. So I researched what the Georgian period was like, what life in London was like. I researched bone setting and I researched the theatre, just enough so that I could do my first draft. And then as I go along, if I need to find out something, if I possibly can move on without doing it, then I just make a note to, check if they had the lights on in the theatre, for example, that kind of thing. And the research is always fun, so you have to be careful that you don't get carried away with the research and not really get on with the writing.
And was there anything you found hard to write, perhaps with the bone setting pieces or?
Yeah, the tricky thing with the bone setting sections were Sally Mapp and bone setters like her seem to have done some almost miraculous cures on people. So it was quite common for someone to come to Sally and they might have had a crooked back or a wonky hip or a bad knee, and they've had this for months. Perhaps they've had an injury that didn't heal properly. And Sally just knew, apparently, where to catch the joint, where to twist, and the person would be cured. Now, we don't know if that happened. And I did have a couple of medical kind of authorities who I consulted, and they said, well, we don't know either. We think those things are unlikely, but they are documented. So we don't know. So that was quite tricky to make it convincing, but not really know if it could have happened. So yeah, I kind of thought, well, how would they know these things? So for example, jury endurance knows that people who walk a lot, their backs and their injuries generally resolve more quickly. And that's something, as one of my medical friends pointed out, that actually doctors have only known very recently. Until quite recently, the cure for a bad back was rest. But as they said, if she's observed people, that is possibly how they learned. So yeah, it was tricky, but it was really interesting to find out how they did that kind of thing.
I immediately sit up straight when you mentioned the back. Did you see that? Excellent writing. So who inspires you in your writing? Do you have any especially historical fiction author that you admire particularly?
Yeah, I do. My absolute favourite historical novelist is Diana Norman, who sadly died a few years ago. And she wrote, I think, about 9 or 10 historical fiction novels set in completely different periods. She goes from 11th century France and Ireland to 19th century America. They're always meticulously researched, and I don't know how she did it because it was pre-internet, but she never hits you over the head with the research. You feel like you're there on the page, but she's not constantly going, I look down at my pink satin shoes. And also there's always a bit of humor. They're always feisty characters. And I kind of like historical fiction that doesn't take itself too seriously. And I try and, do a bit of that myself.
Yes, it's strange how historical fiction has to be modern in a way, doesn't it?
It does really, yeah.
So describe us your writing day. Are there any must-haves, like the cup of coffee in the morning or?
Let me see. I suppose, tea probably more than coffee, lots and lots of tea. Make a lot of cups of tea that I don't drink just to get away from the desk for 5 minutes. Usually a cat on the desk. I mean, you can see behind me the door's shut. If it wasn't, there would be 3 of them in here, faces right up to the camera, frisking around. And I kind of like their company. And I like peace and quiet. I mean, I think it's great that some writers can go into cafes, but I'm just too nosy. I would just be listening into other people's conversations the whole time. So I have to have just complete peace and quiet, really, apart from the cats.
That might make for great dialogue, though. Listen to other people.
That's that. I am listening for dialogue, and I do think that is the way to write good dialogue, to just always eavesdrop on the bus, in cafes, anywhere. but I can't write at the same time.
Yes, it's again about staying modern
Mm.
and relevant. So what is your
Mm.
top tip for nascent novelists?
It's an easy one, really, which comes from one of my favourite novelists. She's called Camilla Läckberg, and she's Swedish and she writes detective novels. And her tip is bum on seat. That's it. You can't sit around waiting for the muse to strike. You can't go, oh, I'll write something when I'm in the mood. Bum on seat every day if you can, every week if that's all you can do, but just get on the seat. And if you have a day when nothing comes, well, that's a day when nothing comes. Start again tomorrow.
So what is your bum on the seat now for? What's next for you, Frances?
So next for me is a story based around the time of the Titanic, and it's about a young woman who gets trapped into an aristocratic marriage, and she sails on the Titanic with her husband, and as a result of what happens on the Titanic, she steals someone else's identity to start a new life in New York.
Wow, that sounds like a movie in the making for me. I keep my
That would
fingers.
be nice.
So we've already come to the end of our talk today on Everything All Right. And just very quickly, Frances, the 5 favorites. So without thinking, what's your favorite movie?
Oh, Galaxy Quest, spoof on Star Trek.
Favorite book?
Favorite book is usually the one I'm reading right now. So at the moment, it's the Diana Chronicles by Tina Brown, which
And
is all the gossipy behind the scenes stuff.
oh, I love those as well. I'm looking forward to the Manhattan Girls, actually,
Mm.
by Jill Paul. A favorite music score?
Anything by ABBA.
Oh, favorite food?
Favorite food, cheese and onion crisps.
And your favorite travel destination?
Stockholm.
Stockholm. Well, there
Yeah.
you go. We've just been talking about our Swedish connection, so that's lovely. Well, thanks for listening and thanks for watching Everything All Right. My guest today was Frances Quinn, and we spoke about her second wonderful novel, That Bonesetter Woman, which is out with Simon & Schuster now. Order it online, or better still, pick it up in your local bookstore. I am Ellen Alpsten. Subscribe to Everything All Right and listen and watch us next week. Thank you so much, Frances.
Thank you.